Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Newasagent podcast. I'm Susie Lysett, Senior Content Executive at Goodlord. And today we're going to be talking about how letting agencies can spot the different opportunities available to them and really make sure that you're taking advantage of those in the right way to make sure that your business is a success or continues to be a success in the long run. So to help me cover this topic, I'm joined by a successful estate and lettings agency business owner, Neil Baldock, director at Charles David Casson. So thanks for joining me again today, Neil.
Oh, you're very welcome, Susie. It's nice to see you, and thanks for having me on.
No problem at all. Well, obviously, we have spoken on this podcast before, and you've been a regular contributor to our blog over the years. But for any listeners out there that perhaps don't know who you are, if you could kick us off just by telling us a bit about you and a bit about Charles David Casson, that'd be great.
Yeah, sure. So, my name is Neil, and I own Charles David Casson with my brother Matt. We're a Chelmsford-based estate and letting agent, and we cover. We've just one office operation, but we cover the whole of Essex for property management. We do residential sales, and we've got a real specialism in HMO management as well, which is the houses of multiple occupation. I also founded something called the HMO Network, which is a national network of HMO specialist property managers as well. And we've been going since 2011. Our company. We've completed, I think, 4 acquisitions of other letting agents so far. That's another part of our growth plan as well. And the other thing we do is we're quite early on in this journey, but we're looking to franchise the Charles David Casson brand as well.
So I think that there are already quite a few different things that we can dig into really there in terms of spotting opportunities, which is why I am obviously speaking to you today. So as you've just quite succinctly put, you have kind of looked into these different ways to expand and different opportunities to grow and different ways to bring in revenue for your business. And let's take it back to the beginning really, I think. So back in 2011, when you launched Charles David Casson, or when it all started to come together, what was your main focus at that stage? Did you have plans immediately to grow into all these different areas, or what was that initial starting point for you?
Yeah, I think if I'm honest with you, Susie, we didn't really have a plan at the time, and which is probably the mistake most business owners make until they've got a little bit of experience in business, and then they realise, well, actually, we need a plan. Otherwise, we don't know where we're going. But yeah, if I'm honest, when we first started out, we probably didn't have a plan. We just knew we wanted to have our own estate and letting agency. That was our background in estate agency. Funnily enough, our background was more in the sales estate agency than it was in the lettings. And as it goes, we've grown further in lettings than we probably have in the sales side of the business. So, but yeah, it's just we didn't really have a plan. We just got going, and it kind of all took off from there. And then we've just spotted different opportunities along the way.
It's interesting, actually, that you say that you did obviously start in sales and then move into lettings, or that side of the business has obviously grown. Why do you think that is? Why do you think the letting side has been quite such a success for you?
Yeah, I think it's just I've recognised fairly early on that because my background isn't only purely estate agency. So I've worked for a number of different businesses, and I was in the police for 6 years as well. So I was in the estate agency out of school, then I took a break and went into a few other things, and then came back to it. But for me, I just recognised very early on that lettings is it's like a contract business. Every time you get a client, you've got a certain amount of revenue a year put from them, and that's going to continue to come along. Whereas the sales business is obviously a one-off income, and generally that's it. You might, if you do things well and you nurture clients, you might then end up transacting with them again in the future. But I just think we recognised quite early on that lettings is the valuable part of the business, and also it's recurring revenue, and so we kind of just naturally went down that route.
I suppose it's kind of big ticket versus consistency. I suppose it's it's nice to have that boost, but it's also nice to have that security of knowing that you are going to have regular income, and you can sort of budget against that perhaps in an easier way than some of the sales side of things, which is perhaps a bit more volatile, if I'm right in saying that.
Yeah, no, absolutely, especially at this time of talking, November 2022, it's getting particularly volatile.
Yeah, I think that's a different podcast topic entirely, but we could definitely do an entire hour, if not more, on that particular topic. But talking about our topic today, so sort of this spotting opportunity. So lettings in its own right is an opportunity. It is a big opportunity for estate agents out there if they weren't already investing in that side of the business. But I mean, you've already mentioned the fact that HMOs, that is quite a focus area for you. I do appreciate that would, as an opportunity, would perhaps be specific to the area that you're in, where you're operating, how dense the population is and so on. But what was the opportunity that you saw there, and how did you spot that it was something that would work for you?
Yes, well, I think the HMO, again, we kind of stumbled across it, if I'm honest. Very early on in our journey, came across a landlord who had a big portfolio of HMOs here in Chelmsford, and he was self-managing them at the time. And he initially just used us to sort of advertise his rooms. And I got to know him quite well and looked into this and the benefit of HMOs. And again, that's probably another podcast entirely about how we can increase property yields and everything else. But what I noticed was there were no landlord knew where. The reason people were self-managing their HMOs was no one knew where to find somebody that was willing to do it. And so I looked into it, and actually, if you spoke to any agent in the town and you mentioned the word HMO, then they wouldn't want to go anywhere near it. So it was very easy for us to spot an opportunity that we could actually carve out a kind of a niche in our own local market where we could become the market leader in that specific type of property management very early on. And the added benefit to that was that no one normally just invests in an HMO as their first property, because it's quite a sort of, you find seasoned property investors sort of adopt that strategy. And so, by taking on the HMO, we were also opening the door to the rest of their portfolio, whereas the agents that were refusing that business were just shutting a door and not knowing what else was behind that client. So yeah, that was really how we got into it. And I guess someone told me a saying once that there's money where no one else is willing to go, and I guess we sort of followed that philosophy a little bit.
I'd say that's probably a top tip, one of the top tips I'm sure that will come out of this podcast. But not shutting the door on those opportunities. It is sort of considering every opportunity that comes your way and just saying, okay, how could we potentially make this work for us? I guess that might not always be the case that it will work, but as you say, HMOs, it's not necessarily the first thing that the agents want to work with. I mean, how did you look past kind of the perception of HMOs and understand that there was the opportunity there? I mean, was it the yields? Was it the, were you in, what was it about your business that made you think that you could take this on and make it a success?
Yeah, I guess for me, I'm an ex-police officer, so I've seen a lot of stuff, and it's quite hard to shock me. So when I looked into these properties, and yes, there's a lot more work that goes along with it. There's a lot of relationship management as well as the property management, but not a lot phases me, to be honest. So I just felt that I had the skill set to do that, and as I say, there was no one else that was willing to do it. But what I identified was actually by taking these properties on, our rent roll was a lot higher, and we could charge a higher percentage to manage them as well. So therefore, we were actually just naturally increasing the amount of income we could earn out of lettings for doing that. And I think it's important to say it won't be for everybody, and quite rightly so. It is a specialist type of property management, and you kind of, I think you got to say no sometimes. Like, whilst we're good at spotting opportunities, I think what you've also got to be good at is spotting the opportunities to say no to, because they're going to distract you from your core business. And I think that's probably an important thing to say as well.
You've obviously already mentioned this idea of the HMO network that you've set up too. I suppose that's there to help support other, agents that are looking to get into this with perhaps some of the bits that may be more difficult to manage if you are purely on your own. I mean, how did that concept come about, and how do you help it in that sense?
Yeah, so the HMO network came about because, again, when you mention to agents that you're managing HMOs, they generally laugh at you or turn their nose up. And what I sort of spotted was that in the traditional estate agency industry, there's a number of different bodies and organisations and networks that you can become a part of, but there's nothing that catered for HMO specialist agents. And when I say specialist agents, we've got everyone from literally they only deal with HMOs to people like ourselves at Charles David Casson and a couple of other companies in the network who do sales, lettings and HMO management, but they have their specialism in that as well. So yeah, it just came about because there was nothing, no offering for that type of agent out there. And so we thought, well, we'll create that network. And so far it's been very well received. And it's just, so we'll probably talk about that in a minute, but collaboration we always go on about is just so important in this industry. It's something that historically the estate agency industry hasn't been very collaborative. I think certainly the last few years through COVID and everything like that, that's changed the culture a little bit now, and people are willing to collaborate. And when you collaborate, more opportunities come out of that as well.
No, the collaboration side of things was certainly on my list too. Yes, I mean, as you say, it is interesting how the circumstances of what's been going on out there for the past few years, COVID, and obviously now the cost of living crisis. Would you say that it does encourage that collaboration? It does push people together to find answers and to work together to do things in a better way? Is that what you found?
Yeah, definitely. I think it's 100%. We'd have preferred not to have the circumstances of the last 2 years, of course, or 3 years, or whatever it is now. But it definitely has. It's pushed people together. People have kind of had to look for support in other places. And yeah, it's just pushed people to discuss things more openly, share costs in some circumstances. There's just so much room for it if people are open-minded, I think.
And one of the other topics as well that you mentioned at the beginning, or one of the other activities that you're involved in, is obviously acquisitions. I guess that at the minute there is quite a lot of consolidation out there in the industry. I mean, how did you decide when was the right time for your agency to start acquiring and growing in that respect?
Again, I suppose we were about 4 to 5 years into our journey before we made an acquisition. So we'd already sold a portfolio earlier in our journey. We'd actually sold a lettings business in one area and then started one again in our current area. And so we were kind of familiar with that process. And then it was another, probably 4 or 5 years before we did one. But we kind of just recognised that trying to build a lettings book organically, no matter how good you are at it, is a slow burner. It's a slow growth strategy. It's a great long-term strategy, but it's very slow kind of growth. And so we just noticed that actually, if we can go out and buy 50 landlords at a time, or 100 landlords, or 200, or whatever the case may be, then we can sort of turbocharge that growth and accelerate things. And me and my brother were quite good at spotting the opportunities. And I always say, now you kind of look at companies in your local area who are doing really well. They're everywhere. You're seeing their boards everywhere. They're online everywhere. They're rocketing, and you think they're the ones I'm chasing. And then what happens is they disappear a little bit, and all that stuff you were seeing, you're not seeing anymore. And you might even see like the owner is all of a sudden back at the front desk in the office, and they're doing the work. And you think, right, something's gone wrong there. And then it's just about having a conversation with them. But I think sometimes, because we're British and we're polite, sometimes we don't like to ask people what's going on. But if you just have an open conversation with people, and don't be afraid to tell people you're looking to buy other businesses. Is it something we could have a conversation about now or in the future? You never know, the answer might be yes.
Kind of the same question, but in reverse, because you mentioned that you did go through the process of selling as well. What made you realise that was the right thing to do at that time? Because obviously you sold back then, and now you are growing again. So what was behind that decision?
Yeah, absolutely. So I mean, at the time, that was a decision because we had 2 other partners in the business, and essentially we had too many people running one company, but also different people wanted to go in different directions with their career. And so it was just the easiest way at the time was to sell the company because we were in a slightly different area. And we just retained the brand and brought it back to Chelmsford, which is where we're local. I think I mentioned to you before I had my own lettings company that I'd merged in with Charles David Casson. So it's a bit of a long story, but essentially it was just a naturally good time for us to go in different directions. And so, but to do that, because there were 4 partners that owned it all, selling the book was the right thing to do at the time.
No, it's a very good point, actually, the fact that opportunities, it doesn't necessarily mean constantly growing. It can be, looking at your business and deciding what it needs in that moment to make sure that in the long run, it's obviously going to be a success and continue to go where it needs to go in the future.
Yeah, no, 100%. I think that's really a great point, because sometimes we're so focused on growth, it can get out of control. And actually, sometimes you need little spurts of growth and periods of growth and then some periods of consolidation. And there's nothing wrong with that, because you'd rather stop and consolidate and sort of make everything secure for the long term, like you say, than just keep running away and forgetting sort of what's coming behind you. And that's exactly right. So it's not always about, there's an opportunity to acquire someone or to borrow some money or to do this partnership or to do this deal. Sometimes there's just an opportunity to restructure your business. So yeah, I think opportunities come in all kinds of different shapes and sizes.
No, well, it certainly seems that way. And I think that one of the other opportunities that you have spotted, which this time it is going in the growth direction, but the franchise concept. What made you realise that it was the right time to consider this? I think you mentioned that it's quite early here in the quite early stage for that. But what made you realise it was the right time and it was the right direction for you to take your agency in?
Yeah, so for us, I think me and my brother both enjoy the coaching side and consultancy side as well, coaching our own staff and helping them to grow in their careers, but also doing that with other agents. And franchising for me is a good, as a business, it's a good sort of leveraged business model where we can train other people to then go and run their own business. And obviously, as a franchise, you do make money out of that, of course. But also it's about enabling other people to have a better quality of life and run a business which can give you a very good lifestyle. And because I came out of the police and was able to do it, there's a lot of people locked into jobs that they don't want, not necessarily in the property industry, but in the armed forces, in the police, in bigger organisations, who are looking for opportunities, but what they don't have necessarily is they've got a lot of skills and a lot of attributes which they've built up, but they don't know how to apply those in the business world. And so for me, franchising is we can give people a platform where we've made all the mistakes that can be made, we've learned all the learnings, and we can give people something that we know is a good and proven business model and say, here you go, partner with us. This is how everything is done. Let us train you to do it. And then they can run off and do, have the lifestyle they want, but with some support as well.
No, it sounds like it's a great way to balance everything and to, like you say, sort of focus on what you are good at and learn that, gather that experience and then take it wherever you want it to go next, I suppose. There are lots of different opportunities out there depending on your personal circumstances within the industry. So it's just a different way to approach it, really. I know one of the other topics as well that we've discussed before is this concept of outsourcing certain services, which I suppose that is the other way to do it if you were an independent agency or, were working, not operating necessarily under a franchise, but looking at all of the different providers that you use, all the different services and so on, and deciding what you should keep in-house to work the most effectively versus what to outsource. I mean, would you have any tips there, any advice to share?
Yeah, so I mean, I think we've got to be open to partnerships and outsourcing. I don't personally like the word outsourcing because I think it means just giving something away and losing control of it and not really caring about it. Whereas, and I'm being a bit pedantic because it is, you're kind of doing the same thing. But if you have a partnership with somebody, then whether that's a partnership with us and Good Lord, we're essentially outsourcing our referencing and tenancy onboarding to Good Lord, but it's still our responsibility to work with you and for you to work with us. And so it's a partnership, and that's how we look at it. And it's the same with agents. Some agents give us their property management, but we're a partner of theirs, and it's very transparent, and we kind of do it together. So I think there's certainly things to outsource where you haven't got the skill set for it, and you don't necessarily want to invest in having that skill set, or even if it might bring something into your office that might distract you from other things that you're already doing, that's a time to outsource. I think where income isn't necessarily guaranteed is not a bad time to outsource as well. So you're keeping your fixed costs down when you don't know exactly when that income's going to come in. So some people will outsource their sales progression, for instance, because they know then they haven't got a fixed cost and they're only going to pay that out when the sales money comes in. So yeah, I think it's also about outsourcing stuff that you can do higher value tasks. And you talk to any business coach and they'll say that to you. Are you doing a £10 an hour task? Or if you are as a business owner, then you need to outsource that either to a member of your team or to a partnership company, as I like to call it, or an outsourcing company, however you want to term it.
I'm always very happy to talk semantics as a content person, so it's a good differentiation for me. And one of these, from a slightly different perspective, talking about opportunities and how to spot them. I know that you've relatively recently I don't know whether rebrand is, whether it was a full rebrand, but refreshed your branding on your site. Again, like I say, it is a slightly different type of opportunity, but why did you choose to do that? What was the impetus behind that?
Yes, I think for us, we did it at a time where we know we want to grow. We're looking, as I say, to franchise the business, and we're working with a number of agents on their property management and things like that as well. So we just wanted to, and when we looked at our local market, we're in a town or a city now where there's approximately 50 to 60 different agents here. It's a very competitive market, and there's not many what I would call young and fresh brands. There's a few corporates, there's a lot of older type independents, and there's a couple of really good looking fresh brands. And I guess within our business, we feel we're a young, fresh company, and our branding had probably fallen behind the people that we're actually sending out to do the work for us. And so we just wanted to bring our brand in line with the people that actually operate this business. And so that's kind of where the brand refresh came from.
Oh, I guess making sure that you can stand out in your market and make sure you can speak to the people that you want to speak to. It's marketing in itself, or the image that you put out there. It is in its own right an opportunity for agents, just thinking about how you're perceived out there in the industry and within your local area. So, yeah.
I think it's good to ask the question sometimes as well. How are we perceived? What do people think of us? Because we were getting that feedback actually that, having looked at your brand and your website, our old website, and meeting you, they're two different things. And when you start hearing that a few times, I think, again, recognising opportunities is about recognising patterns as well. And if you start recognising a pattern of you hearing the same feedback all the time, then you need to do something about it.
No, I completely agree with that. And I think at the same time, if you're going to be investing in something, you kind of need to have a reason behind it as well. You need to have done your research, whether it is marketing, whether it's looking at whether HMOs will work in your area and things like that. It's making sure that you take the time to stand back and make sure that you are making the right decision, or testing it out in some way, perhaps initially, to see whether it is something you want to venture into. But listening and keeping your eyes and ears open does seem to be key in this situation.
Yeah, I think if you just keep if you keep your eyes open and your ears open at all times, and talk to everybody and ask questions. I think if you're an inquisitive person, when something happens, I want to know why, basically. And my team get fed up with me sometimes for it because I'm quite granular to the detail, and I want to know why. or where did we find that last customer? Why did that one leave, or what did that happen there? I want to know all these reasons. But also when I meet other agents, I want to know what they're up to and how they're doing and why they've done that, because I want to, we don't always have to create the ideas ourselves. Actually, sometimes you can just copy it off of somebody else. Why reinvent the wheel? So yeah, I think you're right. Just always, and actually, it's funny when you say that, because one of the biggest skills of an estate and a letting agent is listening. So we should be doing that in our own business as well.
And also, obviously, we've focused quite a bit on the successes so far. I know that we've talked about when you did sell, towards the start of your business, and that was for a specific reason, to consolidate and so on. But would you say that you've faced any challenges, that you've jumped into some opportunities or looked into something that you've realised, actually, we should back away from this, it's perhaps not for us?
Yeah, definitely. I think we have done that, and that's why we've been planning our franchising, for instance, for quite a number of years, but we've messed around with it a little bit, if I'm sort of brutally honest with ourselves as well, because we keep stepping into this self-employed agent movement that's happening in the UK at the minute. And for us, that's not for us. And the reason that's not for us is because I think there is space for that in the market, but it's a very high recruitment model. Some work, some don't. It's like a hamster wheel of recruitment, and the people operating those companies won't tell you that, but that's the reality. You need to bring on many, many agents. Some work, some don't. But it's because they're putting their personal brand out there with no brand that's really recognised. When someone leaves, it doesn't damage the brand. Whereas for us, we're very much brand centric with the people behind it, and so that model wouldn't work for us because we're potentially going to damage our own brand. Whereas the franchising brand works for us a lot better because we have a little bit more control over it, but we're also working with business owners and people who are willing to invest and actually grow a team and everything like that. So I think that's one place we've kind of made a mistake in sort of flitting between the two, really. And then, and I mean, we have it all the time because the sales market is so volatile. Sometimes, we have to consolidate on that a little bit, get it right, and then grow again as well. So, yeah, we're definitely not we're not perfect, and I don't suppose any business is, if they're honest with themselves.
I say it's the same with anything in life, really. You have to make mistakes to learn from them, and as long as you haven't put all your eggs in one basket, kind of thing. You have to test out ideas before throwing everything that you have into investing in it. Then it's worth trying things. Especially right now, where is perhaps the right time to start thinking about diversifying and finding different ways to bring in some extra revenue. Obviously, that's always an ideal for a business, regardless of the political or economic circumstances. But would you have any other thoughts in terms of advice for agents if they are looking to diversify? What kinds of areas they can look to, and how they can, aside from being out there and listening to what other people are doing, what's the best way to go about looking at diversifying their services, perhaps to earn that bit of extra revenue?
I think there's lots of resources online now. There's lots of podcasts, there's lots of YouTube videos, etc., from lots of different suppliers now. There's plenty of estate agency Facebook groups you can join and ask advice and things like that. I think for me, and I mean, some agents would say, well, no, because I'm like a diehard sales agent. But I think in this day and age, if you're not operating a lettings business, it's madness. And the good thing nowadays is you don't have to operate it. You can just do the fun stuff, find the landlords, find the tenants, and then hand it over to a company who will manage it all for you. It's like with the sales progression, you can hand that out. There's so many ways to collaborate now. I think sticking to having your eggs in one basket, you've got to have the balance between not getting distracted with something that takes your eye off your core business, of course, and that's really important as well. And you've got to be able to recognise when actually you have been distracted and you need to spend a bit more time. But there's always that 80-20 rule. And if you're spending 80% of your time on your core business and 20% of your time on perhaps new opportunities, then you're not going to go far wrong. But I think, diversifying is a good thing to do, as long as you're not taking your eye off the ball on your core business.
Well, I'd say that's a pretty positive comment, really, to wrap up our conversation. Unless you think that we're missing anything that we should have talked about in terms of spotting opportunities out there in the industry, if there's anything that we've missed off out of our conversation so far.
No, the only thing I'm just thinking is, like, there's always this talk within our industry about increasing your fees, whether that's your sales fees or your lettings fees. And I think sometimes that's an opportunity you've got to spot is, can I increase my fees, and am I charging my worth? And, with the cost of living coming and everything else, all the inflation we've got at the minute and everything going up, I think agents should be believing in themselves. If they're operating a professional business, delivering an exceptional service, then they should believe in themselves and charge their worth, basically. So, there is an opportunity to increase your fees if you show value. People don't mind paying for things as long as they see value. And so it's not about just increasing fees. It's actually about increasing value in order to increase your fees.
Well, I think I was wrong before then. I think that was the perfect way to wrap up the conversation. Good positive final comment there. No, well, thank you ever so much, Neil. I think that's been really interesting. I think that, considering you said at the beginning that you didn't have a plan when you set up the agency, it's obviously gone quite well for you. But as we've discussed, you obviously went about it in the right way. You've tried different things. You've consolidated where necessary, rather than just continually pushing to grow. So spotting those opportunities. It's more about understanding your own agency, your own business, and understanding how to take it forwards in the best way, which will obviously be different for everybody. I do really appreciate you taking the time to have a chat with me. So thank you very much.
That's been great. Thanks very much, Susie.